Thanks so much for joining us today, Jesse.
Thanks so much for having me.
I am very excited to both be able to share your story and the work you're doing with Heroic Hearts. So I'm very glad that you've come on. I think a lot of people who are active and then also former military will have a lot that they can get from your story and the work that you're doing. So if you could take us back to when you first left your military service.
Of course. So I was an Army Ranger for a number of years, which included multiple deployments to Afghanistan. When I got out of the military, I traveled for a bit, went back into finance. That was my background. For a while, I was able to sort of ignore and distract myself from some underlying issues, but eventually life slowed down and it started all catching up to me. And it took a hold of me in the form mostly of depression, which got more and more severe, anxiety, multiple different forms. I was self-medicating a lot with alcohol to continue to try to ignore it. And I was just stuck. I had this black cloud around me. I was trying to do everything right, and I didn't know how to get around this. I didn't know if this was just something I'd have to deal with, like this is life, I guess, that I'm unhappy in my job, and this is just a tough slog through everything. But I just knew it wasn't right for me, and so I started subconsciously at first, but then realistically trying to figure out what was wrong and how could I figure it out. And so that led me sort of a course of really analyzing my life and holding myself accountable for my actions. And so I try to get into better shape. I'd kind of let myself go a little bit, eating healthier, starting a hobby, cooking, trying to meditate, trying to journal, all the things that you can kind of easily look up online. I even went as far as went to the Department of Veteran Affairs mental health office. I set up an appointment, went there, and I essentially said, hey, I'm having these issues and I just really want to talk to a therapist because I know there's only so much I can solve within my own head. And so eventually I got to a social worker, but unfortunately the conversation didn't get very far there. The social worker, who's a very kind, nice woman, uh, they
We made it 2 minutes and 26 seconds. First off, there's a bunch of noise, so I don't know if it's your thing hitting your collar or if there's something on the table that's making noise.
let me try to move rooms. We'll see if that's any different.
Okay.
This mic normally isn't that sensitive, so I don't know why.
Well, it's not an outside thing. It's either your shirt or something on the table. Because the
Okay.
outside noise was different from the noise that was something inside.
Okay. Is the audio coming clear as if like the microphone is working though?
It is, but whatever the other thing is like covering your voice at times and like competing with your
Okay.
voice. That's a nice background
Okay.
there. Okay. Let's start up
Does
again
it seem
at. Go ahead.
does it seem better now?
Now it's gone.
Okay.
But touch your collar. I think
Yeah.
it's hitting
Is
your
that
collar.
you think it's in the collar?
Yeah. So if you could like flatten
Okay.
out the collar a little bit, like or just something like that. Because the other collar is laying flat. If it could do that, then I think it's gonna stay.
I can also change shirts real
It's,
quick.
it's up to you. Let's see if it's
Wardrobe.
the wardrobe malfunctions. Okay, I think if we stay right there, we're good to go.
We'll try to remain as still as possible.
Okay. Awesome. Had you like I kind of forgot where you were in your thought process when we got cut off.
Okay. Is it okay that I moved scenery and stuff?
Oh, haha, totally fine. Yes, that's fine. Um,
Okay.
yeah, can you just say the social, like starting from the social worker?
Okay. For sure. So I finally decided to use the VA's resources. I went set up an appointment with the mental health center there in Florida, and got to see a social worker. Very nice woman, trying to be very helpful, but she pretty much leveled with me and said that because I wasn't personally willing to go on medications or at least try that treatment, they didn't have that much to offer me. Even just trying to see a therapist, they were already pretty much overbooked. And she said that there's a lot of people that had severe issues, and they didn't want to detract from that. And those other people were willing to take the full sort of treatment protocol that I wasn't willing to take. And essentially, I walked out of that office with the feeling that it was pretty much on me to figure out, which obviously made me a little bit angry, but also just led me to continue to ignore my issues because, who am I, not a registered professional, to figure out my mental health trauma? I already struggled at that point. So I continued on with my life, still just wasn't happy, and it just got worse. It became more days during a week where I was unhappy versus happy, and I just knew that was not a formula for success. I knew at some point I'd make some sort of very unhealthy or irreversible decision that I just couldn't take back. Fortunately, around that same time, I guess serendipitously, I had heard about ayahuasca. I heard about it through a podcast. There's more and more social media about it. I came into viewing it almost very skeptically. I grew up in that generation where all drugs are bad, and if you take drugs, then you probably also bad, or just trying to escape things. And that was my whole conception of it. I almost prided myself in never having smoked pot or done any drugs, and I was fine with other people doing it, but I always kind of looked at them of like, why do you need to do that? But it planted a seed, and just being bored at work, I would start looking up articles on ayahuasca because it struck me as a little bit different. And I just started going down these rabbit holes, and fortunately I did. The more I read about it, the more it seemed somewhat plausible. It started transforming in my mind from, oh, this is something I'll never do, to maybe in the right circumstances. And then fortunately, just some instinct in me just said, hey, I need a change. I'm not happy in my job. I'm not happy in my life. What am I staying here for? And I made that big decision just completely out of intuition, that I left my job and I decided to venture to Peru after a lot of research and pursued this path of ayahuasca, which I had absolutely no idea what had in store for me. And so that's really the start of my own health, and then also the very beginnings, I guess, of Heroic Hearts Project.
Yes. Well, I love that you followed that thought of like, I can't be unhappy forever. There has to be some other answer, because I know what it's like. I mean, I worked at the VA for 9 years. A lot of people get in the system, and if the system isn't helping them, it's like, where else do I go? And it's no fault of the VA. There's just limited resources. And I appreciate that you're like, okay, I know I have this one mindset about drugs, but maybe this is a little bit different. And I think that's going to be valuable to a lot of people to hear that you changed your mindset a little bit from this is a drug to more of like this is a medicine that can help in some way.
Right. Or I just knew it was a big change, and I knew the small changes I was making were having an impact. So it's like I might as well try something, and I'm glad I did.
So what was it like when you went down to Peru? Talk a little bit, if you would, about what your experience was like. Was it like a multiple day ceremony, or one? Did you sit one night? How did it go?
Yeah, of course. So I decided to go to a week-long retreat, and so it was in the middle of the Amazon. And during the week, it included the opportunity to participate in 4 ayahuasca ceremonies across the week. And I chose this place just because it seemed to actually have a therapy side to it, as opposed to just wanting to get your money side of things. And so I went there, nervous, not really knowing, just kind of going with that same instinct that drove me there, not trying to ask too many questions in my head, and not trying to have those "what are you doing right now" sort of moments of thought. And so I went there, was very nervous going into it, especially never having done any really mind-altering drugs before, and especially not something as powerful as ayahuasca to be the one to start it off. But I took that plunge. As nervous as I was, I took that first drink, and it was a massive hit to the system. It was a very challenging process, physically, mentally, and it continued that way. So the first 2 ceremonies were just all at war, essentially. It was my mind trying to wrestle control from this foreign substance that everything in my body was just trying to reject by any means necessary. And my ego was struggling for control. My body was struggling not to to get back to normalcy. And the more I struggled, the more it fought against me. It's like the Chinese finger trap of psychedelics, And within that, though, that was the lesson. I needed, as they say with psychedelics and people who are using them, the biggest part of it is to let go, is to allow it. If something's scary, then you go into that. If something's challenging, you ask why, and you face it head on, and you just allow it. You just come to the realization that you are not in control, and that's okay. And that took me, being as stubborn as I am, some time to figure out or to learn. But through the process, I eventually did. In the ceremony itself, at some point it was almost like a hand reached out and brought me into this sort of serene, tranquil world to show me that it didn't have to be suffering, it didn't have to be pain. And it took me a while. I'd go back and forth between this very painful physical to complete serenity, breeze on my cheek, and completely calm. But eventually, it was almost like a muscle I was learning, a muscle in my brain that I never knew was there, but I was now learning how to have access to it. And as I kept doing this trial by error, I was eventually able to stay in this peaceful zone. And even though that all sounds metaphorical, and to people listening to it, is like, how does that relate to anything? Cool, you found this in a psychedelic trip, but what happens on the outside? But that did actually have lasting effects on the outside, one of which was just that very controlling nature of my brain finally had calmed down a little bit. It quieted down a lot. But then also that sort of back and forth of finding that calm spot was a tool that I could later use for anxiety. Anytime a severe anxiety came on, I could, like I said, almost flex that muscle and go right back to that calm state.
Wow, I love that description. I've never heard that, like relaxation as a muscle that you can employ when it's helpful and when you're in these situations where things might be becoming a little bit anxiety ridden.
Right.
When you were in that, I know as a former service member, there's probably, like you were talking about that fight, it's probably a lot of, I'm guessing, you can tell me, but you're not supposed to be ever really letting go and letting your guard completely down in the service. You're there to protect, and first off, you have to know what you're doing and where you are and all about your surroundings. And so I'm imagining that that may have played some part in why kind of that letting go and surrender was a little bit difficult those first few nights.
Right, and so it was a double-edged sword. So on the one side, you're exactly correct. And there's a funny anecdote around that. Later on, a group of veterans I recently sent, and one of them was also a fellow ranger. And in the ceremony, he was having this very hard time, similar to myself. And the shaman, the curandero, told him, "Hey, you just need to surrender to it, let go." And deep, even though he was deep under the ayahuasca influence, he just said out, "Ranger or surrender is not a ranger word, because in the Ranger Creed, that's one of the things we're memorized." And so surrender is not a word we take lightly. It was just a very funny sort of side of it. So there is that, it's like, no, I'm in control. I'm leading this. I'm the alpha here. But on the other side, it was that challenge. It was really being pushed, beaten down to the floor, the base level background.
I lost you at base level.
Yeah, so having it push you down and beat you down to that base level to the floor really gave me respect. Coming from this military background, this ranger, high speed, sort of military experience, if it was just this gentle massage on the shoulder the whole time, there's no way I would have respected it. I would have just walked away and probably thought, okay, that was a nice little, relaxation, but I don't know how that's helping me. The fact that there's this force that I completely didn't give the credibility to, that could completely make me want to, that completely submitted me, gave me ultimate respect from day one. I knew this was something that I had no idea about, that deserved.
Uh, Start with that deserved.
I knew this was some force that deserved my respect, that it didn't live up to the stigmas that I had surrounded it as, just this escape from reality that, you know, that is not, that is just that's a drug in the sort of the 1990s perspective of what drugs are.
Yeah, definitely ayahuasca is not escapism in the pleasureful way. I mean, there may be some moments
Right.
that are pleasureful, but a whole lot of it, like you said, is work. And
Right.
and everybody I think who's done it kind of chuckles when they're like, "Is it addictive?" And you're like, "No, I would not want. Why would I want to keep voluntarily going back to that? Like, you go, you get the messages, you wait, integrate for a while, and then when you feel like you're called to do it again, but you still know you're in for a ride. This is not like a rave drug that's going to be party time. This is
And
intense.
every ceremony is different, and you know, you always have to go in, everybody always goes in with some apprehension, because that's a respect for it, because you never know what's going to come out of it. It can be this blissful, love filled serenity world, but it can also be, you know, your own worst enemy right in your face. And you know, since then, through the Heroic Hearts Project, we've sent some very high level veterans, you know, guys who have been in 20 years, special forces, SEALs, Rangers, and they've done some, you know, pretty tremendous stuff overseas, some very challenging stuff, and have seen a lot. And oftentimes, these ayahuasca experiences are some of the hardest things they've ever had to face. You can see sort of the fear of God after, you know, some of the middle ceremonies. But fortunately, it ends up tying together, and they understand that through that struggle, they get to a better spot.
Yeah, I love that. Now, speaking of, what inspired you once you've done your own ceremonies, you come home, what inspired you to start sharing these with others?
Say again the last one.
Let's see. I'm always writing down the times when we lose each other. Um, when you ended up coming home after you'd experienced this change for yourself, what inspired you to find a way to share that change with others?
Right. So after that, like I said, I'd left my job. So fortunately, I had saved up enough money, and my plan was to travel and figure out what I wanted to do next. I'd done the corporate finance route, and I knew at the very least that was not the path I wanted to go down. So I could at least check that box off of never again to return. And so I was just using the remaining time I had to travel to really self-reflect, look back on the what was holding me back when I was in Florida, and what ways I could progressively change and actually make something of myself in a way that I would enjoy life while doing a profession. But then in the background, but
Start with in the
but in
background.
the but in the background, I had just come from this profound experience that I could barely even describe. But I was also surrounded by all these amazing stories too, and you know, there's obviously the bias there, but it just became abundantly clear to me that there's more to this than just a drug, that just this, you know, just this trip for a week time. There had to be something more of substance there, and that's, you know, started growing again in the back of my mind. And during the time I was traveling, I was kind of playing with this idea. I decided to call up some friends and let them know what I just did, and ask them if this is something, like, what they thought about it. And these were, you know, guys still in the service. And I was surprised across the board. You know, it might have not been for them, but they were pretty open to it. You know, a lot of the military, especially the special ops community, tend to be, if it works, who am I to say that you shouldn't do it? You know, this is your own healing, and it's that sort of culture of like, you have the objective by whatever means that you can accomplish that objective. And so this was just very reinforcing, and you know, I again took the next plunge in my life, and realized that it was almost an obligation at that point of, I had this I had experienced this thing that I knew could at least help some people, if not, you know, not, I would never say it's for everybody, but I knew there are people like in the service and veterans that, like myself, that even if it helped one or two, then that's worth the effort of pursuing this. And I had, you know, with a business background, finance background, I knew I had some of the skill sets to possibly make this work. even though it's this big black box. And so it almost became this obligation of, I know I can help some people, so this is sort of my, I guess, mission to do that. And as I progressed and started building Heroic Hearts Project, as was often happens in the ayahuasca world, events and circumstances and people found me that almost built its own momentum. That's not to say I didn't, I haven't been I've been working nonstop for the last 3 years, but I've also been very fortunate of, being in this small town and randomly meeting another veteran that could help, or, coming across the email of somebody and then them reaching out and being able to help move me forward in a big way. So it's just been many stories of that. And so as challenging as it can get, and as many times as you just want to stop or question what you're doing, there's always those moments of light that keep you tied to it and keep you moving forward. And I'm fortunate I have, because especially this year we've been able to help a lot of guys, and I've seen some. Where did you
Start with, and I've seen some.
Oh, and just this past year, we've been able to help dozens of other veterans that have serious traumas, and we've just seen some profound changes in them, to the extreme of just completely changing their view on previous suicidal ideation, and that's very powerful to see firsthand.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so important these days. I think that's why when I hear people like, I think his name is Jonathan Lubecki, talk about psychedelics in the military, it's like we've tried the regular medicines. People are still committing suicide, our service members and our former service members, at an alarming rate. We have to try something else. Like you said, whatever we've got the objective, the old means aren't working. Let's try these new things. And
Right.
so I really appreciate how you took it upon yourself to find a way to help more people like yourself experience this healing. How exactly does Heroic Hearts help the vets? Is it giving scholarships and they go find the retreats themselves, or do you take them on the retreats? How does that work?
So we're trying to build a whole sort of program and pipeline to set each veteran up with as much chance of success as possible. And so Heroic Hearts Project is a 501c3 nonprofit. We're registered in the U.S. And so it starts at the beginning. We have an application process. And what I've found is vetting the vets of going through the applications, and especially at this stage, seeing who would be good candidates is a big first start. And that sort of criteria, without giving too much away, because you obviously don't want people to game the system, but we want people who have tried other means of therapy, who are at that level, that are ready to take or to put in the work to make the necessary changes. Because with the psychedelic process, that's just one piece of the puzzle. It can bring profound realizations and some answers, but the person still has to implement these changes and make some hard decisions in their real life for it to fully take effect. If that person just wants an easy answer, then they're probably not meant for this at this time until they get to that spot. And there's some other criteria that we use, but I've just found that finding that Goldilocks situation with veterans has had tremendous impact on the results. So then after that, we work with them. If they are, a lot of the vets, unfortunately, that have mental trauma are also generally financially restrained. And so we provide a scholarship when we're able to, completely based off donations. So we help assist them get to this, because it can be, somewhat costly, especially if we're
Costly.
It can be somewhat costly because we work largely overseas, and that's how we're able to maintain our nonprofit status, since it's still an ambiguous state in the U.S. And so to help them financially assist that, we provide them coaching with certified integration coaches, which help with the preparation, answer the question, ease their nerves, but then also just have somebody to talk to that's been through this experience. And then we handle the logistics in terms of helping them find the right flights and packing and all that kind of stuff. Just really setting them up as much for success. The retreats we work with, we've all vetted. Somebody from the Heroic Arts team has participated in ceremonies there. We know the owners, we know the facilitators, and so we have complete confidence that they can work with veterans, but also have a good product and the appropriate appropriate spec for the therapy side of this. And then on the tail end, we follow up with them. The same coach will help them in the integration process. We give them, we have a whole list of literature that we can give them to read to help them figure out ways to incorporate this. And then we have group calls to follow up with them. As we grow, that's always the part that we can always improve, because everybody's a little bit different. Everybody takes a little bit of a tailored sort of system, and so we're trying to figure that out. A lot of this is very uncharted territory, and so we're just trying to do it slow and responsible, almost like a traditional clinical practice as much as possible, because what we're dealing with are serious issues, and we want to be responsible and respectful to the veterans themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that setup. It's like you said, it's so dialed in to have the best chance of success. Beforehand, you're
Right.
making sure that the people have the right mindset, and then that preparation and integration being huge pieces that you're also helping take care of. It's not like, hey, we just sending you to the jungle. Like, you're making sure they're prepared there, or before they go there, while they're there, that the place is vetted and knows what they're dealing with. And because there can be a lot of special, more veteran or PTSD associated things that they should be aware of. And then also when they come back, they've got a plan to integrate this into their life. What kind of results are you seeing?
So we did like late last year, we did an internal survey, not scientific, but we had a few questions and just really getting the feedback on the veterans that we've sent. And across the board, everybody said that their lives are better now than they were before they went through this therapy. So, just having that result is great, because obviously the last thing I want to do. Just having.
Want to do.
So just having results like that is really empowering for me, because the last thing I want to do is cause more harm to these veterans that are seeking our help and reestablishing life. It's the nature of it that sometimes people don't really have that big of a profound effect. And I hope we can minimize that as much as possible as we learn more. But like I said, the last thing I want to do is have them worse off, and we haven't had a case of that. And so on the low side, it can be people that, like I said, won't have super profound effects, but it will still get them in that thinking process that maybe recovery and healing from these issues is possible. And so even that light at the end of the tunnel is a huge victory on a therapeutic side. And to the extreme, complete life transformation. Like I said, now looking at suicidal ideation almost with a laugh, like that, how could that even be possible? I talked to a guy today, and it was a very powerful story. And it's a funny guy because he's a giant dude, just a very intimidating 6'4", former special forces sniper, had seen quite a lot. And he came into our program like that, just very, man a few words. You could see in his face that he was almost regretting being there, but he pushed through. And he's had one of the biggest transformations. And I talked to him on the phone today, and he was saying it was a little bit weird because he was almost like the 17-year-old version of himself, where he was a little bit more carefree and fun and jokes around, as opposed to the military guy that was precise and had to have everything in this sort of military sort of manner. And he was saying it was just such an interesting thing. Like, his wife recognized it, and so she was a little skeptical at first, but she, it was an interesting thing for her to see. But the really touching thing was he was talking about his kids who had only known the military side of him. This very exacting, demanding, kind of person. And he was saying beforehand, if it was something like making a bus before going to school for his kids, he'd be, hey, we have to be there right on time. It's almost like the exfil of a helicopter. You can't miss that, otherwise you're going to be stuck on mission. You know, it's not an option to miss that. And he was just saying the other morning he was making chocolate chip pancakes with his kids, and he realized of like, no, this is much more fun. You know, if they miss that bus, we'll get the next bus, or I'll drive them to school. And he's like, he made that decision of I'd rather make chocolate chip pancakes with my kids than cause this huge stress about making the bus.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing that story. I mean, it's some people have no idea what and the kinds of things ayahuasca can bring, and it can be just that kind of like a magical. It's like, okay, yes, it may decrease your symptoms for all these things, but if it can just help you connect with your family more and realize more of what's truly important to you in life, that's a huge win.
Yeah, so that was a magical thing to hear, and you know that's what continues the mission forward. You know, if it was anything else, then this would be a completely, and that's what I tell people is like, do you think I want to spend all my time and what money I have to just struggle and hit my head against a wall? You know, there's a reason I've been dedicating so much of my life to this, because it's results like that. You have to continue forward.
Yeah, well, I truly appreciate all the work you've put into this and the healing you've helped bring to people. And congratulations on how well that seems to have gone. I realize we just lost connection. I'm going to start again from congratulations on how yeah, congratulations on how well that is working per the stories. Like even if it's a mild transformation, like you said, if it gives somebody a glimpse of hope that can maybe ward off that suicidal ideation, you are out there saving lives. So I truly appreciate what you're doing. How can vets find you, and how can people who may want to contribute to the nonprofit to help those vets find you?
So we're on most of the major social media. Our website is heroicheartsproject.org. And on the website, there is a veteran application. And so if vets are interested in being our program, they can fill out that application. Just a caution, be patient. You know, as we gain more prominence, this is a pretty serious issue among veterans, and so we're doing our best to help everybody, but it can be a very slow process because there is a long waiting list. For those that want to help in other ways, we have a vet ambassador program, so they can fill out a very short application if they're a professional, or you know, they just want to donate some time. And we're developing that program, so we're trying to find ways to support that. And so we're working on that. And then obviously there is the donation side. There's a giant donate button. It should be pretty easy to find. We have a Patreon. Like I said, it's all tax deductible because we're a registered nonprofit. 100% of the proceeds go directly to the vets. Nobody on our staff takes a dime from it. It's all volunteer. And then across the social media, it's look up Heroic Hearts Project on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And the Instagram is great. Krista, she's been doing a great job running it, and it just constantly updates of various news pieces around the whole psychedelic community. So it's just a lot of people have really enjoyed following that as well.
I was going to say, before you even said it, your Instagram is as on point as any Instagram I have ever followed. Like, I know I can find whatever the latest study is or the latest article, Heroic Hearts is on it. That Instagram account is just beautiful for somebody who wants to keep up with the latest in the psychedelic world. So kudos to Krista, and if there's any other Instagram team, they're totally killing it. I advise anybody listening who wants to, you follow Maps, you follow Heroic Hearts, you're covered. Like between those two. Psychedelics Today, Psychedelic Times rounds you out. You got those, you are covered. And if anybody forgets the name, go to plantmedicine.org, scroll down, and I've got Heroic Hearts on the front page under the Veterans Help section. So hopefully we can get some folks your way, both, like you said, in the donate of time, donating money, and people who can seek some healing through what you do. So Jesse, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing today.
Thank you so much, and thanks to the patience with the schedule and all the connectivity issues. Really appreciate it, but it's truly been a pleasure to talk with you a little bit.
I appreciate it. Nobody out in podcast land will know there's any problems with anything. Everything will be edited out, and they'll be like, "What's Jesse talking about?" This isn't the 17th time we've done this. Jesse, you're a very good sport. I appreciate it very much. And for everybody else out there, until next time.